Hello and welcome to a video which is a bit different from my usual videos because I'm not going to be speaking. Kind of did a video like this a few weeks ago where I just had a general chat about card game stuff relating to L5R and other card games, and about sort of storyline and content and things like that. People quite liked it, and I've kind of been kicking around this idea of doing a bit of a sort of marketing strategy, digital strategy review of card games for a while, as you know, previous experience I have in terms of marketing, working in PR, and in terms of sort of currently now working as a business analyst and these sorts of things. I look at these questions on a fairly regular basis. I ask what companies are doing and things like that. So I thought it'd be interesting. If you don't know me, my name's Finbar. My Discord tag is Steelfur. I am an L5R commentator, I guess I call myself now. I used to be on the Court Games LCG podcast run by the Discord the Discord server. I run the London Legion online event series. London-based L5R player of reasonable credentials. I made top 32 at Worlds last year, and I've played the game, and I enjoy talking about the game probably more than I have skill at playing the game. This is kind of a discussion about L5R, but I'm not going to get too heavy into L5R specifically or mention things like online tools and things that people are using to engage with the game. There's a specific reason for that. Just as a sort of news update, earlier this week, one of the TTS mods, Tabletop Simulator, for those who aren't familiar with it, for L5R was brought down by a copyright infringement notification assumedly issued, and it has to be issued by the company that owns the IP through Steam. So someone, of course, put in that request, and therefore it was taken down. Now the timing is poor, clearly, because you don't take down a fan-made digital product during a pandemic where everyone can't leave their houses. I mean, that's very poor. I think that goes without saying. And obviously, it shows the disconnect between legal teams and, say, the game teams running the game, who obviously wouldn't want this to happen. But I don't want to get too heavy into that. I just want to let you know why it's happening. So if you think, why isn't he just saying the name of the platform that's used, given that he's going to spend the entire weekend streaming about it? Well, it's because this video is a bit different from that, and I want people to be able to watch it, or people who work at the company to be able to listen to it and hear the feedback, engaged in it without being exposed constantly to the name of platforms and things like that, and creating that risk for them. You know, because my ideal is that if someone from the companies who make these games wants to watch this video, they don't want to have to constantly be thinking, well, I can't hear that, I can't hear that, you know, all that sort of complications. And also just being a bit more careful given what's recently happened with TTS, and just making sure that we're sort of in a bit of a safer situation. I'm obviously not going to stop streaming, using the online platforms for the game, because let's be honest, and a lot of this presentation talks about the fact that that is where the player base is for the game, like now especially, but also generically is there. So I think failing to acknowledge that would be silly. But yeah, other things to note. So I'm currently surrounded by falling sakura. I'm just testing a new program because my room gets messy. I don't have a good backdrop, so I'm just going to try and see what it feels like to have this backdrop eliminated. If it's working, I may pay for it and actually put something nice back there. But for the moment, I thought falling sakura was quite good. Even though this video, you know, is about L5R, but it's not just about L5R. I want to talk a bit about Keyforge and stuff like that as well, because I think a lot of these points are relevant to Keyforge players, to L5R players, and a lot of these points are sort of relevant to people, to companies that haven't made a proper shift to acknowledging their digital consumer base and sort of really engaging with a digital community in a way that's productive and sort of, you know, we'll say is necessary in these times especially, but also more generally in the age that we're in. You need to have that feather to your bow, or you lose competition and competitive edge against other card games that simply have it and have that as an option. And obviously, the bigger card games have very polished versions of it. But I think, as we'll argue through this presentation, your version doesn't actually have to be as polished as that. It just has to work and provide the service and have some form of digital engagement, and you'll have that string to your bow. So let's go into a bit more. I've just called this card game review because it covers a lot of topics, and whatever I was trying to capture was way too long. So first, I want to give a quote that I find very useful, given by a person who's written about 18, 19 books on business in America, called Seth Godin. And he basically says, don't find customers for your products, find products for your customers. And basically this idea is that you should look at what your customers are doing and start thinking, how can I better engage with them to bring them a product that they want and to give them things that they respond to? you already, as a company and as a game company especially, you have you have uh, a customer base already, or you're trying to build one if you're a startup. But talking about the games we're talking about today, you have a customer base already who assumedly like your game in whatever format it is. And the idea is you're not. I mean, you should be trying to find new customers, but you should also be trying to find things that work for the customers you have. Right? You can have that new player introduction strategy, but especially when it comes to board games, your community is a lot of your marketing. Your community is a lot of your selling. If they have good things to say about you, your game, and the company that makes the game, this is important. It's not just the game, it's positive interactions with the company that makes the game. They will be a lot of your word of mouth. So you need to be finding the products that work for the customers you have and engaging with the customers you have in such a way that creates this positive feeling. Because the other quote I was going to put up on here is it was from someone who works at Salesforce. I can't remember the name right now, which basically said it doesn't matter how much you're selling to a customer or what they're buying from you because they feel they have to. It's about the engagement and the feeling that your customer gets when they take a product of yours home and when they buy it and how they feel about your company on an ongoing basis. And I think that this comes back to the point that we're going to be making throughout this, is that there is a way that customers of these card games interact on a daily basis, both now because of the crisis and generally. And it feels like that in the company specifically we're talking about, Fantasy Flight Games, there's a disconnect between that reality and the strategy of the company in terms of messaging, in terms of what they create, what they allow. And in some ways that strategy itself feels archaic. Like it feels like it comes from an older game company that hasn't really moved and embraced the digital age. And there might be reasons for that, which we'll talk about as we go through this. But there's just this awareness that your customers are where you need to be, and you need to be getting things to them that make them want to spread that message for you, rather than you trying to spread the message yourself. Because board games are about engagement, positive reviews, and buying a product that feels good. And there are a lot of times when, less so in Keyforge, less so in Marvel Champions, because that's fairly new and designed well, and those will be my good comparisons. But certainly when it comes to L5R, where that initial product, that core product, is both super powerful and super useful, but also feels negative to engage with from a starting point, right? Because, originally if you bought it, you couldn't build a deck from it that was legal for an event. You had to buy 3 of them. And now you still have to do that, but there's alternate formats, which we'll discuss in a second. So moving on from this, so what I've done, and I do this sometimes for a living, and I think this is kind of useful to do, is model sort of how we feel the L5, well, this is specifically L5R, but also just this idea of like how the customer base of a card game looks. And I guess this could apply to Keyforge as well, right? So if you look at Model A on the left, we're talking about 35% of the customer base who buy the products physical only. So that means that they buy the product in their shop, they buy it online because they see it on a deal, they read about it, they think it's cool on Board Game Geek or something like that. They buy it, they take it home, they play with it. Maybe they go to their local shop once a week and they engage with people. They that they do that sort of model where they never really go online. They don't really engage with the community. They don't play online because they play board games because they enjoy playing board games with people. They don't play board games to play online at a distance. They're not that serious about it, right? This is one model. And then you've got 55% who are mixed, so they do a bit of A, a bit of B. They'll play a few games, online platforms, just to practice before a tournament, or just to play a game with their friend who they can't meet up with, for example, in the current coronavirus situation. And then I think we have to acknowledge there is probably a percentage. Now, I personally think this percentage is 10% of the population who don't buy products, who just play online, and I think that there are people like that who exist who will never become physical customers. And I think that's important to acknowledge, because it creates a worry, which is, if you have a digital product, you enable more people to play without buying your product, right? But equally, as we know from looking at things like the video game market and stuff like that, there is always going to be a percentage of people who will only pirate a game, and if they can't pirate a game, they won't buy it. And there's a percentage of people who, if they can't pirate a game, they will buy it, right? Or if you give them the game to pirate, they'll buy the next one because you earned their trust with the digital product that they got for free, right? There's loads of complexities going around here in terms of consumer movement, but basically the idea of Model A is people are going to shops, and we'll break this down a bit more in a second. They're buying the product and they're playing with it, and that's it. They're not engaging with the community. They're not going online. They're not playing online. Now, the second model, Model B, is what I actually think is the reality for a lot of people, is that you've got this 15%, which is the people who walk into a shop, buy it, and don't do any more. And I'm talking about people who continue to be customers. I'm not talking about someone who goes in, buys it, and never touches the game again. I'm talking about people who are still playing the game. Now, I think for Keyforge, this is probably a bit higher in terms of people who just buy decks and play with them at home. I think if you're looking at something like L5R, because the game is quite complex, it doesn't really reward kitchen tabletop playing by itself, or it didn't until Skirmish was created. And if you've seen my other video on Skirmish, you know what Skirmish is. New format for new players, boiled down, good for old players as well, but it's dumbed down format to make it easier to play the game faster. But Keyforge doesn't have that problem. You can buy decks of Keyforge and play at home, and I imagine that number of physical only players is higher. But the point is that if you look at something like L5R, you'd imagine the large percentage of the people who continually engage with the game, i.e. who present a potential further customer for Fantasy Flight Games, are in fact a mix of digital and physical. So they're buying the products whenever they can. They're playing some games online. That's how they get their weekly games in, because their local shop doesn't meet that often. And then they're using that to keep their engagement with the game, and then they're doing physical products. So to break these down a bit more, because there are lots of implications of this, right? So the first model implies a large portion of physical only sales, so single core, small packs for expanding local home games. It's the person who buys a couple cores of L5R or a few Keyforge decks, likes a faction, so buys more from a set where they typed online, they found, Logos is really good in Worlds Collide, or what, they put dinosaurs in the game, and buys some decks of Worlds Collide and plays at home with their family, their friends, on a semi-regular basis, but not, that often. Never really transitioning into that sort of aggressive, competitive space where you practice online a lot. It includes people who don't play online ever, and just the local tournaments. And it includes a lot of this is something I do want to address, because when the community thinks of itself, it thinks of itself as Model B. It thinks of itself as a large online community with a very small portion of sales they don't see. Now, this may not be the case, and without physical things, these models are just for discussion, because I don't have actual numbers, right, from FFG or from anyone saying what these are, but these are just ways to talk about the what could happen. So what could exist, and I've rumored that this did exist with a game like Netrunner, for example, which I heard from I think it was a board game shop sale. He said that people come in, they see Netrunner, they like the environment, the setting, they buy a box, they play the box as a board game, you never see them online, you never see them at events. And there could be this large core of stealth sales that the community is unaware of that exist and sell boxes. With Keyforge, I could easily see that being the case. With L5R, I don't, like, people might buy it for the setting, but it if people read reviews about it, they're reading it's a complex game. They're not going to look at the box and be like, oh, I should buy this, unless they really, really like Japan. So it's a bit tricky. For Model B, you think about it in terms of physical sales are still very, very high, because people are keeping their collection up to date, even if they're playing online. Most people who buy a product engage with the product online in some form, whether that's through Facebook, Discord, Reddit, all of these sorts of digital channels. And these days, you'd expect that to be very common. You'd expect to see high levels of digital engagement with the community, even if it's just showing up to grab some files from the website, or if it's showing up to just Discord, hey, how do I build this deck, or what's the best pack for me to buy if I enjoy playing Unicorn, something like that. And then they go back and they keep playing, at home, but they engage with the community in some way. And Model B sort of acknowledges that whilst most people enjoy playing in person more and want to attend large events, the reality is that a lot of people play a couple of games online every week, right? Certainly in Keyforge, definitely in L5R. Some of the big players practice online. If you're going to a tournament, you practice online. Now, whilst the people who play every day is probably a small percentage, especially now, the idea that you're logging on and playing an online game once a week, you might want a couple of games of L5R. You'll be on Tabletop Simulator, well, you would have been on Tabletop Simulator. You'll be on other platforms, and you'll you'll have voice comms on with your friends. You'll be playing a few games, right? A lot of people casually enjoy online gameplay in Keyforge and in L5R on a regular basis. We're not saying they're diehard, they're not practicing for the next Vault tour or something like that, but they are engaging on an online basis. And I think that's important. And the reason that I drew up these two models, just to go back to them for a second, is to look at the ideas of how we perceive of the customer base for a card game. Is it primarily this 35% of people who buy the game, play it at home, and never come into online at all? Or is it this, where there's a bit of this, a bit of people just buying to play at home, and then a bit of this where people dabble online and do a bit online? Now, I think a lot of people are going to dabble online. They may not be on all the time. They may not be playing online. They may just be involved in the online community, but maybe they get a game or two every now and then. And the fact is that is just a reality of modern board games. There's a reason that Tabletop Simulator has mods for all of these massive board games. There's a reason that there's digital versions of Magic the Gathering, Terraforming Mars, Gloomhaven. Like, name a board game, probably has a digital version. FFG themselves, and we can talk about this later as a problem, created a digital version of Lord of the Rings, the card game, which was very good. And just to think about that for a while, they made that decision because they thought the market was there. It was cancelled because it probably didn't sell enough. But if you look at that game, it had voice actors, it had really complex graphics and storytelling. Really, it's kind of like that's a step further than the majority of people who fall into Model A or Model B would expect, because they're currently playing with online fan-made tools that aren't particularly. They're good, they're well designed. They don't have they have serviceability issues. They have release of pack to delivery issues. They have issues just in terms created just by the fact that it's a volunteer designed system, right? Which you'd expect, and they work very hard, and you create these things that allow people to play in a positive way, right? Without and obviously there's problems, and there's going to be problems. So to think about then what challenges are created if we imagine these two different ways of customers engaging with the company, right? So for Model A, you have limited information on purchase. You might find some online. You have the box as is. You have the rules. You might check online if you're up to date and you're engaged. You might check online and see if there's an updated version of the rules, right? Okay. But a lot of times you're just going to buy the box as is. You're going to take it out. You're going to expect the rules to teach you how to play. Right, now in a game like Keyforge, very good. In a game like L5R, that is a nightmare. And you've heard of new players spending 3 hours on their first game for a game that should take 45 minutes to an hour maximum. So that's tricky. The staying power of the game is based only on the rules and the fun of the games, and other factors like art assets and setting and things like that do appeal to people, even when they're playing at home. And you have those sorts of things that come up. And I'm just going to change this background, is really annoying me. Just give me 1 second. Let's change to, let me be in the desert. No, I'll be in an office. That's fine. Let me know. I'll be talking. That's fine. The Sakura was nice, but it was annoying me because of the white on the thing, and I'll need to do a different type of PowerPoint again. So anyway, getting distracted. So then for Model A as well, with this primary sort of physical user base, they would maybe only use digital tools to arrange in-person events, but don't use for gameplay. So we're talking about people who don't engage online. Low awareness of online community if they buy a product in isolation. If someone walks into a shop and buys a box of L5R or a couple of boxes of Keyforge because they think it looks cool, they're not going to go and find the Discord. They're not going to go and find Facebook. They're not going to engage in other ways. They're just going to play the game, and if it's good, they'll play it. If it's not, they'll chuck it on eBay, or they'll chuck it in the cupboard and they won't take it out again. And this is where it gets interesting. So these people are kind of like the ideal target for your more casual, alternative-friendly format, like, for example, Skirmish in L5R. So for Keyforge players listening, Skirmish is basically a simplified version of L5R where they take out a lot of the framework steps, and it goes from being a 45-minute to 1 hour game to a 10 to 30-minute game. So it's kind of like a simplified version of the game. If you haven't tried it, I really recommend it. Obviously, do not play it now because you are supposed to be at home. You filthy pig. Get at home. That's from a TV show in Britain for all the US watchers. So it's on Netflix, so maybe you've seen it as well. Wash your hands, you filthy pig. Anyway, so where was I before I started trying to make bad jokes? So they are the ideal target for these sorts of alternative casual-friendly formats. The issue is that if you're buying a product in isolation, you're less likely to be aware that those alternative formats exist. Now, specifically in something like L5R, where you've created this very complex, casual-friendly format, the only way to play that game is you can play it with a core set, which is good. But the only way you learn about that format is going online, finding out about it, and then downloading the rules. So there's nothing in the old product that this format was made to enhance that indicates that it exists, right? And so, how do you make people aware of those products is something we'll discuss in a bit later. It's like, what do you do to create that sales pathway where someone is buying this old product? And let's be honest, the original version of core L5R out of a box is not new player friendly. It is complicated, it takes too long. And as I said before, if your first game takes 3 hours, you're not going to want to play another game. Like, you could play something simpler that has less complicated rules and gives you more fun. And also there's all issues with the core set only coming with one copy of multiple cards. That means you have trouble building certain decks, right? So, you have trouble building decks that have like multiples or reliability, even though the new format is 2 cards only. So, that's important to think about. How do you create awareness for these products among people who might just walk into a shop and buy them, right? And then it's just the problem that sales stagnate when the product ages compared to new releases. If people are only buying it on the shelves with minimal online engagement, then there's no reason to get into the game when a new game comes out that has a similar setting. Like, for example, if you wanted to play a samurai-themed game, you might buy a copy of Rising Sun. Quite expensive, but you might do that. And then you see L5R, you're like, I might play L5R. All it takes is another game that's set in a samurai setting to, stop L5R being the game you buy off the shelf if there's something new and exciting. So what do you do? Or like Keyforge, for example, you might play Keyforge. Magic releases a new format, you might suddenly go back to playing Magic. They had that new format they've done now where you like shuffle 3 decks and some land, 3 booster packs and some lands together or something. I don't know the details of it, but it's kind of like extra randomized booster packs that come with themes or something, so you can shuffle like a goblin pack together with some red mana and stuff like that. I'll have to look into it. But my point is that like something like that comes along and it's shiny and new, you're less likely to play if your only engagement is walking into a shop and buying a product and not digitally or engaging with the future. Firstly, if the product isn't fun, which arguably L5R is less fun out of one core, you're less likely to buy the product, right? Or at least it was less fun out of core before Skirmish came. Now it's quite fun out of one core. But before that point, L5R originally out of one core, it's quite a slog of a game to learn. It's one of the reasons why the new format was invented. So, if that's your experience, you're not going to buy more products. You're just going to leave it, right? If we think about a more digitally engaged community, our model B, which is a more digitally engaged community, you think about, firstly, I've said this is often how communities view themselves. It may not be accurate. The truth might be something like Model A, where lots of people are just buying the product and taking it home. But this is what the community thinks it is because that's how they've got visibility of themselves. If you have a situation like we have now with FFG, where there's a lack of support for digital gaming, that ignores the primary day-to-day experience of a lot of people playing the game, especially during our current crisis, where digital play is the only option. And, this crisis has in many ways revealed the complete lack of a system to support digital play and left a lot of players feeling neglected, because all that comes out of a company like FFG is OP's cancelled until August if you're in Europe. You've got nothing. We'll do more stories. Maybe if you're a story-based game, we'll spoil the cards. To be fair, they have given print and play decks for Keyforge, but there's a kind of a joke there. If you don't live with someone who you can play Keyforge with, you can't use the print and play decks. So, even that is an analog response to a digital problem, right? And we'll get kind of into that in solutions, right? But consider that, right? So FFG's Keyforge solution to the crisis was to release print and play decks of the new Keyforge set so that you could print them out and play them at home. Now, if you're on the forums, Keyforge forums, for example, your first response was, well, that's great, but I've got no one to play them with. Your second response was, how quickly can these be put on the online platform so that we can play them against each other? Like, those are your 2 quick fire responses. Firstly, I've got no one to play with. And secondly, you know, how quickly can we get them online? Because that's the only way I'm going to play them now. So, you know, players feel neglected when you don't engage with them how they actually play the game. So the fact is that if there's no effort or acknowledgement of online play for these games, players feel neglected because you're watching from a distance how you engage with the game. And okay, we know to a certain extent that, you know, there's legal grey area, right, where these products exist and they could be shut down, but they're not because of various reasons, you know, partly because they increase publicity for the game. You know, we can say that kind of candidly. That's the theory, at least, as to why, you know, some things get shut down and others don't. You know, the theory is that tabletop simulator mods get shut down because you have to buy tabletop simulator, whereas other free platforms that let you play the game online, because they don't charge and they're run basically by donations for server costs and things like that, there's a bit of a grey area where those can be allowed to exist. But if it's something behind a paywall, like if someone released a fan made but pay for version, that would be shut down quickly. And then the tabletop simulator, because it is behind that paywall, it has to go away. So, you know, there's a bit of a complicated legal area there, and we understand that. But equally, if there was a strong strategic decision by Asmodee or FFG, then there is no reason why the digital client that's already fan made and designed couldn't be brought in house or built collaboratively between the two, that couldn't be made official in some way, and all of the benefits to the community that come with that can be made. Like, you could have prizes for online events and stuff like that. And the other problem, of course, and a challenge for this digital community is that because the solutions are volunteer based, they do have these issues. They're fantastic, they're great, they're updated very regularly. You know, and because they're volunteers who are engaged in the community, they listen to feedback and things like that in a very active way. But you can't deny that there's a difference between stability between something hosted on a corporate server, you know, with a decent, like a small but decent dev budget chucked behind it, and a volunteer made. Let's also acknowledge the fact that there's lost opportunities for revenue. If you listen to the Team Covenant stream where they were trying the new Skirmish Up format a few days ago, they were just laughing and sort of just no clue why there is not a digital product for Keyforge, for example, where you can buy decks online, and if you want to, you can pay FFG to ship them to you, or, you know, like that sort of thing. Because FFG's algorithm for Keyforge can generate decks randomly. They can generate like 1 million decks per set that they're not even going to print. They could sell those codes and like ship decks. They could sell online deck codes through brick and mortar stores if they wanted to, like your Xbox you know, credit codes that you can go into game and buy. Like, there's a whole system there where they could sell digital codes through online stores, and you'd buy the thing like you currently do if you want to play online. The shop you buy your Keyforge deck to might send you the QR code so you can scan it if you're buying an open deck. You know, that's the sort of thing you've done before. But my point is that there's lost money there. There's someone who's sitting bored at home on a Tuesday night after they finished work and they're knackered. They're not going to schedule time to go and meet their friends. They're not going to have any way to play this game. They're going to log online, and at the moment they're just going to play through a free platform with whatever decks they've already got or whatever decks they haven't got. If you had a system where that person could buy a deck, play a sealed event, and call it and play 3 or 4 hours and call it a night, that person could come back and buy a deck from you like 3-4 times a week, you know, minimum. And if you create a mechanism where they can get those decks they bought and take them to vault tours, for example, like it doesn't even have to be shipping. You could, as a player, like, this is how intelligent the Keyforge system is, right? You could, as a player, with enough notice for an online platform, say, I have this deck online, it's not been printed, I would like to play this deck at a vault tour, and you should be able to send a request in, right, through the platform saying, can I have this deck for the vault tour? You pay your £3 or £4 for printing or whatever, and that deck gets brought to the vault tour for you. Like, we live in a digital world. There is plenty of local printing services that companies can use. Keyforge, for example, being printed in Germany. Now, maybe that itself is an example that goes a step too far. But the point is that if you're printing these decks custom, you know, in print runs, you should be able to have some sort of digital thing. You know, maybe if you want your deck online, you have to book it, and then 3 or 4 months later it comes, you know, because they have to add it to the next print run. But the point is that, you know, or they print it in-house because they've got a promo printer in-house, right? But the point is that they'd be generating that money, and there has to be a business model that makes this digital sales thing work and allows Keyforge to function like the sealed digital platform that it's made for. Like, look at Keyforge and tell me it's not designed to work on an app, work on your mobile phone. The mobile phone development versus PC development is a big difference, right? Not designed to just work on your PC and let you play games at home. It's simple. It has no engagement on your opponent's turn, which is one of the main things that delays online play. And you play MTG Arena is responding to your opponent's actions. Like, all of these things are designed for an online platform. The fact that one doesn't exist is a joke. So my point is that, like, you could gain revenue from this, but also, let's be honest, you could gain positive engagement. One of the biggest criticisms of FFG from the community, which they try and address every now and then, is just there's a lack of engagement with the very community that does it. Now, this has changed certainly in L5R recently, where FFG has set up a channel on our Discord where content creators like myself, and this is fantastic actually, can ask direct questions of FFG about certain things that happen and what goes on. This is a night and day change from what existed before. This is night and day, and it is genuinely fantastic, and they are responding to us, and hopefully it continues beyond this current crisis. The issue is that because of big strategy decisions higher up the chain than marketing, in terms of digital at the company, these things can't happen. So even if we said, could you support with prizes for an online event, they might have to say no because they can't acknowledge the digital solution. They don't have their own. Therefore, they can't do the thing. They can't provide the support. So the fact is that, that there's this thing where, because you're not creating your own digital platforms, you're actually just denying yourself money, but also creating negative engagement with the community because you can't provide a lot of things that would create positive engagement, right? You have lots of opportunities for positive engagement you can't create. And, I'm not a developer, but to me, if you're looking at L5R, for example, and there's already a way to play digitally, I don't see how 3 or 4 volunteers can make a platform that, FFG or Asmodee can't make and capitalize on. Now, I admit there'll have to be more work done on network, more work done on creating, sales channels and things like that for the product. But if you ask me, is that worth the investment? I'm surprised you haven't done it already. Like, if this crisis has shown us one thing, is that we now live in a world where digital solutions are paramount, where you have to be able to engage with a product remotely to care the product exists. How many gym memberships have been cancelled because you can't go anymore? How many, people are arguing over nursery fees because their children can't attend? All of these things that you had that you've paid money for that you can't do. The only things that are surviving in a world of COVID, and let's not, I shouldn't really say COVID. Anyway, in a world of the current crisis, the only things that are surviving are those things that have set themselves up properly for digital experiences. And the only reason, I'm going to be honest, the only reason the games that exist now are still relevant during this crisis, like Keyforge, L5R, are still being talked about through this crisis, are still seeing community engagement through this crisis, is because people like myself with my online tournament, and I've seen many for Keyforge, are actively using these tools to create positive engagement. If they weren't, these games would be dead until they could be played again in person. And how many people would not bother coming back? How many people would spend the 4 months playing Magic the Gathering Arena or playing, any other game, League of Legends, Teamfight Tactics? There are so many great games for computer, mobile, whatever. How many people would play those games and not come back because you've taken 4 months off? Now, it's one thing if you've got 4 months with no new sets because you can't get them to people. People understand that. But the fact that you don't have a digital way to play your game means that your company has, and this is important as a big challenge, zero resilience to these sorts of events. Now, I'm not a fearmonger and I'm not an epidemiologist, but the fact is, with increasing globalization, these sorts of problems as in human level problems. You call them human level problems because they affect humanity around the world, are set to increase. Whether it's a natural disaster in one place, whether it's another pandemic, all of these things mean your company has to have resiliency. And failing to create a digital solution means that zero resiliency exists to keep relevance in your product. And okay, not every game works as a digital sales channel. You can't sell L5R packs. Well, to be fair, if you were in America, you should be able to buy an L5R pack, get it enabled in your digital library, and then get it shipped to you by FFG. Or again, buy a digital code from a brick and mortar store, have it emailed to you remotely, and then pick up the product in person at a later date. Like, there are systems that could be created, and they need to exist. My final note on challenges is just that if you've got, and if this model B, where there's a lot of digital customers who are engaging with digital solutions, is true, then any attempt to shut down fan-made platforms without replacement will lead to such a huge community backlash that some of them are untouchable. The responses in the L5R Discord to Tabletop Simulator being shut down, which ironically is the only way to play the new format that was released just as the outbreak started at the moment. The only way to play it really nicely was through this Tabletop Simulator mod. The fact that that has been shut down has been called by myself and others, tone deaf, foolish, a mistake, clearly a case of lawyering, trumpeting over common sense, and many other things. Stronger sentences were said, but the point is that any movement against these systems leads to a huge community backlash because they are an integral part of day to day. But the fact is that they should be creating a positive experience for the company rather than creating a negative one because people are worried that they're going to be shut down. And if they were controlled or interacted with or acknowledged in some way, then there could be positive interactions on them that would further boost the profile of the game and create more opportunities for engagement rather than less. So let's move on to challenges to talk about how we solve some of the problems, right? So if your model A is true, if there's lots of physical customers, you need to release new game modes that reuse older products, right? So for example, if you're trying to get people to buy stuff in a shop, you do what you did in L5R. You release a new skirmish mode. You do what Magic does with Legacy and Modern. You give people a reason to buy older sets. But the critical factor in those, and the reason I want to talk about it, is awareness and support, right? So you've got a problem with Skirmish L5R, for example, is that the resources for it are only available online. There needs to be some support to create awareness of that mode when you're buying that initial first product, to create a good initial experience that makes people want to buy more. Now, for Skirmish, we're talking about things like a small, like £5 Skirmish pack that you sell alongside the core that has the Skirmish rules, some promos in it, that sort of thing, and just makes people excited to play with that format. And that way you've got something to put in people's hands and say, well, look, buy that, buy this, play this format because it's better, and it's kind of like an update. And okay, if you put something in it, maybe you can get old players to buy it because it will have the Skirmish stuff in as well. But also you'll be creating a direct pathway to a positive gaming experience with that core box, right? Because L5R needs to sell the core that it has on the shelves. I've been to my local shop. They still have core in stock. A lot of people still have core in stock. So there is the thing where L5R does still need to shift its core set. And that's probably one of the reasons that Skirmish was created, was to help sell core sets. But there needs to be some awareness of Skirmish to tie it in so that people can buy core and enjoy it, and without having to look up the rules online. It's not a good customer journey. If I buy this product and I don't enjoy playing it, and then I'm like, well, what is wrong with this game? And then I Google it, and then I find, because I may just put it in the cupboard, or I may just not buy it. Whereas if you have a direct pathway, it's like, look, this is the new player thing. And there are many ways to do it. Like, you can release new streamlined products that reflect the learnings you did from when you released the game, and make the out-of-box experience better. So that's get rid of core set. But obviously, if you've still got to sell the core set, you have to create some method where both products are relevant. So this idea of an upgrade pack or a Skirmish starter deck that leads you to core set if you want to get into the game a different way is a good idea. Now, Keyforge doesn't have this problem. This is more of an L5R problem, because obviously I think Keyforge has a really good go-to-market, just in terms of, you can buy 2 decks and play it for 20 quid. Now, there are problems with the Keyforge model in terms of how good are those decks. Where are they on the bell curve of Keyforge decks? Are they going to be competitive? Are they going to be too far apart? But Keyforge is quite good in terms of having a lot of decks in the middle ground. So if you buy two, you should have a relatively good experience. Obviously, if you want a Vault Tour winning deck or something like that, you're going to have to spend a lot more money, which is kind of like the trap of Keyforge. Keyforge, right, L5R's on the left side. It has a really annoying pathway to entry, but once you get in, the costs are set and not ridiculously expensive. And Keyforge has a really, really easy path to entry. But if you want a really competitive deck, you either have to be very, very lucky or have a lot of money, right? Because you need to pay for power, basically, in terms just like you would in Magic. Actually, kind of more insidious than in Magic, because in Magic, after spending a certain amount of money, you can build the best deck. Whereas in Keyforge, there's no guarantee that however much money you spend on booster packs, you're going to get a deck that's capable of winning a Vault Tour, right? So it's a bit more insidious. But if you think about those two contrasts, it's kind of funny in terms of sort of on the one side, you've got a card game that's really hard to get into because it's an LCG. Once you've got in and you've bought the stuff, the cost is like tenner every 3 months or something. Like it's not huge. And then Keyforge is like new set 3 times a year. How much are you going to spend on boosters to try and randomize your way into a good deck? You can't customize it. If you just get shit decks, you can't do it. I stopped buying Keyforge decks for that specific reason. I like the game, I enjoy playing it casually, but I never want to have to spend as much money as I would have to get that perfect deck. And I kept opening decks that were just close, but not good enough. And I just no, I can't do this. The other thing, of course, you could do, which is the cheaper option, I personally think creating a small pack that goes along with it is the best option because people open it and they're like, okay, these are how the promos work, all this stuff. It's just create marketing products that stores can give away to incentivize sales. With the rules, create a marketing pack that people can print and play that says, oh, look at this great new format for L5R. You can play it with one core box. You can play it with one core box, but ideally it's better with two. But my point is that you can do that and make it available to new purchasers through both online stores, give stores a way to give it out, maybe give them a promo to give out along with it so people will take it, and give them an incentive to give it out with the product so that every set of core that sells in L5R sells with a copy of the skirmish rules. This is my point. Those two things can never be separated. Skirmish is a better way for new players to learn L5R. There has to be a direct pathway where no copy of core is sold online or in person without a copy of the skirmish rules. Right? I fully believe that is for the health of the game, that has to happen. And also maybe make marketing things that promote the fact that skirmish is created that stores can put up next to a copy of the core and say, hey, there's this really good format for L5R. Maybe you tried it before and you didn't like it. Maybe you haven't tried it yet, but you're kind of interested in Samurai. And you read on the back that it takes 60 minutes for a game. No, it doesn't take 60 minutes. It takes 30 minutes now. Do you want to learn to play? And they can do skirmish learn to plays, and you can do a learn to play skirmish kit for them. Yeah. So if Model B is true, if more people are digital, if your customer base is primarily online, you need to engage with that customer base. They're there. This is how people are day-to-day doing the game. If you're not engaging with them, you're losing money, you're losing opportunities. So what are you doing? You need to engage with the game. You're not going to change the trend. The digital boat has sailed. Most people play at home because it's on their schedule. People like coming home and firing up a game of League of Legends or firing up a game of MTG Arena, drafting for a bit and going to bed. They're not going to go out. For a lot of people in America, they're not going to drive for 40 minutes or an hour, get on the tube in London to go and play the game every night of the week. They're going to be too tired. They're too busy. People are time poor. They have families to consider. People have moved to digital for a reason. It's not just the current crisis. It is also the fact that digital fits in around your life and you can do it much more regularly than that once a week game. And there's a reason that digital games are a lot more successful than in-person only games is because they enable things. You should also just acknowledge and support fan-made sites and create your own digital product. I work in tech. It's not necessarily that hard to code a website to have a good experience. And once you own it, all of the problems with legality in terms of, we can't provide prizes for that tournament online because it's not on our platform, disappear. It's your platform. Okay, you have to take a certain amount of, it crashed. Okay, we need to get the dev in to fix it. You have to take a certain amount of that burden on. But think about how positive the engagement is. Think about the fact that you can charge product for products online. You can charge for tournament entry online and ship prizes to people. You can do so much with a digital product. And the fact is, you need to, because as this crisis has shown, you have zero resilience. And you can't just have your product become dead and irrelevant for 4 months because something happens in the world that stops people being able to meet up and play it. That's the death of a game. And you can't rely on the community to keep it going because, the Keyforge community is having a bit of a thing at the moment where the Crucible wasn't being developed in the way that some people liked, so they made their own version and now are promoting it everywhere. But they copied the Keyforge code, and there's a bit of bad blood going on there. I haven't been following it because it's drama. My point is that doesn't happen if you own the product. You need to support online play, whatever form it takes. You need to find out where it is. You need to engage with the people, and you need to support it. You can't shut it down with your lawyers. You can't, put it at risk. You will have so much community backlash. It is not worth it. People will stop playing your games. And if you do this, if you provide support for online play, you can direct new players to online communities and systems that allow them to engage with the game a lot more than they can do from their own kitchen table, right? This is what I get about marketing products, right? If you acknowledge that the majority of the community is digital, there's no reason that you can't give out a page with any new purchase, organized through the stores, through some sort of system. I mean, you have good relationships with distributors. Make it nice, give out a promo, give out a page that basically says, here's your game Discord, here's your game Facebook group, here's where you can go for rules, here's where you can go to play online. Here's where you can have more engagement with the game. Because if people get hooked into that online system where they're talking to people, they join the forums, they talk to people there, they engage with some of the content creators like myself who are talking about the game and really passionate, energetic, all these sorts of things. If they do that, then they are going to get stickier. They're going to churn less. They're going to be more keen to buy more products when they come around. And that's the key thing, is how do you get people to buy more products beyond, say, that core set? If you look at some of the fantastic work that's being done in the Marvel Champions game where they're making fan-made heroes of their favorite heroes, people are playing those heroes, loving it, playing those villains, loving it, and then that's causing them to engage more with the product. When people play L5R online, a lot of times people come and play L5R, they maybe don't have all the cards. They bought a couple of core sets, and they're wondering how the game feels if they were to buy in, right? We have this big thing where people are like, look, I don't have all the cards. Can I borrow a deck? I want to see how the game feels before I buy in. And we'll give them a deck, and they'll play online, and they'll get a few games online, and they'll say, yes, it's for me, or no, it's not for me, right? But the point is that that's how you get people to buy into an LCG. It's not by them buying a core set and thinking the game's really fun. I mean, that might happen a bit. It's them going online, playing with all of the cards, and then being like, I'm willing to spend 400 to get this experience and go to a tournament where this is happening, right? That's how you get those LCG players in, is through that digital portal that lets them experience what the game feels like with a lot of cards in. Because the core sets are never big enough. The core sets, even Cycle 1, which you can get on a pretty good deal, is never big enough. So yeah, that's the point. If you acknowledge online systems, you can direct new players to them, which I think is a huge thing. And you can also provide support that feels good. So I'm running an online event series for L5R. We've had sort of 80 people at the last one. It's kind of like this, it's just to do with the fact that OP is shut down. I've organised prize support myself. We're running it on donations because we're not allowed to charge entry, because if we charge entry, then we're charging for FFG's IP, which we're not allowed to do. So, there's a lot of problems. There's a lot of risk that you take on. If people don't donate, do you still give out the prizes because you have to pay for them yourselves? And I'm lucky that I'm in a situation that I can fund that, and that's fine. And I'm creating a lot of stream content and things like that. People are enjoying and engaging with it, and I'm having a good experience. But the fact is that I also went to the people who run the game, and I said, your OP is shut down for 5 months. I'm trying to keep people, I'm doing whatever I can to keep people interested in this game. I've made my own prize support. Can we get these prizes for the game? So specifically in L5R, if you're part of the top player of your faction, you get a special title and you get a playmat. And I said, look, I'm not asking for a full suite of promo cards, promo decks, whatever. I'm just asking, can we get those titles, those playmats, and an invitation to Worlds for the winner of my event and several other events? And I was told, well, look, you can't acknowledge online events, therefore you can't have those prizes. I'm like, okay. So that's this blanket no, because there's no interaction, so you can't have those prizes. And I'm like, but it's so straightforward. You have 80 people playing your game on an online platform. You have 50 to 100 games happening every day. You have online tournaments with 200 or 300 people, as we've seen in L5R. Like, these games are happening, and if you're not engaging with them in a positive way, they're happening without you. And that's the biggest thing I think here, is that if they're happening without you, how does that work as a digital corporate strategy to let these things happen without you? You can't shut them down, because that's really negative. That doesn't work. But if you're not engaging with them, if they're just happening without you, then you don't have any control. You don't have any input. You can't use them as a justification for you being good at engaging with the community or creating good experiences for your players, because you're not there. Your players are doing it for themselves. So then we say the community's really good. The community does a lot to help us. We don't say Fantasy Flight Games does a lot to help us. We don't say, there's a lot coming from them. We say the community does this for us. And I think that's the biggest letdown, is that the biggest problem that needs to be solved is you as a company should want to be doing this for your community. We had a big discussion about like cards that were coming out, and some of the cards for one faction were a bit worse than others in L5R. And imagine if you were a Brobnar lover, for example, and you wanted to play Worlds Collide, where the cards for your faction were sufficiently underpowered, and nothing was said about it, because to acknowledge that it was a problem is a problem in itself. But the fact is that as a customer, you want to feel courted. You want to feel like you're important to the company that you're spending money with, however you're spending money with them. Like, you wouldn't go to a restaurant that has bad service. Okay, I mean, people will go to restaurants with bad service because the food is very good. But my point is that you think twice about it. You don't want to go to a restaurant with bad service. And if the product's then bad and you're getting bad service, then you'll leave, right? So if the cards for your faction are bad and no one's talking to you about it, then you just go. So the point is that there's a lot of things here where I think the customer base, and this comes back to the quote that I said at the start of this presentation, is don't create products, don't try and find customers for your products, create products for your customers, is to think about your customers as the main people you have to serve. And wherever they are is where you need to go to court them. You need to go onto the Discords where they are and give them sneak peeks for being on the Discord and for engaging. You need to bring more people to the Discord and engage with them. You need to direct new players there so you can engage with them through those systems. You need to provide special content to them. Maybe like we had a create a card thing for L5R a while ago. That was really good. Maybe story engagement or story votes for L5R based on the Discord, where you're clan locked for a while. And, we had AMAs and things like that happened that were very good. I don't know how this takes. You could definitely do create a card for Keyforge. Maybe create an anomaly. That would be really good for Keyforge. You could do so much. But the fact is that unless you have a digital strategy, all of these doors are closed to you. And there needs to be a digital strategy. That's the biggest problem to solve. You can't let overspending on something like the Lord of the Rings card game stop you from putting out or at least helping with and acknowledging a simple, maybe browser-based version of, a system that allows people to play your games online. Even if it's not the most polished system, maybe it starts off unpolished and you put in some dev time, you contract out a developer or a UX developer to build a better system. These are all things that a company can do. And the fact is that they should be part of your bottom line. And a failure to have digital strategy, which is all, look, the only way I can say it is there's a failure to have a digital strategy, because I can't see it. And I've been playing L5R for 3 years. I play Keyforge. I've looked at what they've done in the past with Thrones First Edition and all sorts of stuff. I cannot see a digital strategy at Fantasy Flight Games beyond a bit of marketing, and that's it, right? And I can understand that people are scared of digital, especially if it's not your strong suit. But when we're talking about coding a website, or coding like a window app, like, it doesn't have to be Magic the Gathering Arena. No one expects your standards to be set that high. It would be great if it was, but we know how much money that costs to make. But we also know how much money it generates for the company that runs it. But there is a medium point. There is a stepping stone where an online platform is either acknowledged or taken in-house or supported in a way that makes it possible to engage with it in a productive way. And I think failing to do that is the biggest problem that I would address on this, because I don't think this Model A, I think it represents some people. I think you need to do this as well to get random people coming into the game to sell the stuff that's on the shelves. the older products that are on the shelves. But I think this is where the true core of the future of the game lies. It's engaging with the players digitally so you can speak to them at home, not just because of what's going on right now, but just in future, because this is the day to day. This is why I get a couple hundred views on some of my videos. It's because people want the content and they want to be regularly engaging with the game, because especially something like L5R, because the setting is so strong, people want to engage with it. And you can watch my whole other video I did last week about stories and timelines and how there's a bit of a problem with how fast the universe is progressing, because people are coming to L5R wanting that story to develop aggressively, so they can get into it. In terms of Keyforge, there's just so much untapped potential there, which you could do with online games. So that's there. So let's. So I quoted someone else. I'm going to quote myself. I'm a research analyst, so I do research into businesses and stuff like that. That's why I'm doing this sort of presentation. It's why this sort of presentation comes naturally to me. And I was doing a presentation to some people a few weeks ago, and I said basically this, but less glibly. I was doing a presentation on the effects of home working on networks, essentially, and how how things had shifted on home working networks, what was happening with certain digital tools in terms of Zoom and stuff like that. We had a load of research on it. But I said basically something that amounted to the tune of digital connections have proven to be the salvation of our sanity during this crisis. I said it a lot worse. I've tidied it up since then, but I quoted someone else. I'm going to quote myself. I have that right. And also, I can then quote this in a later interview that I do. So this is positive, right? I'll be like, oh, this presentation I gave like a few weeks ago where I said digital connections have proven to be the salvation of our sanity during this crisis. But it is true. People left alone by themselves with no human interaction go stir crazy. People want to engage and feel like their life is as normal as possible during this crisis, which is why people have been kept working from home. They've tried to make routines and things like that. And one of the big things for us, the people who play board games, is the ability to keep playing these board games and keep playing other games regardless. And I have to say that without the online platforms that let us play these games, my lockdown experience would have been drastically different, but also, let's be honest, drastically worse. Like, the fact that I can still play online lets me engage with my friends, lets me create content, lets me have fun, lets me help other people to have fun by running events. It gives me things to plan for and things to be excited for. I haven't just lost my favorite hobby overnight because I can't go and play in a game shop. The fact is that this crisis has emphasized how important digital is and the digital avenue to our lives in allowing us to maintain a semblance of normalcy now, but just allowing us to maintain connections during normal times as well. Be it, playing the game online, talking about it on Facebook, watching a stream. All of these digital channels have to exist if you want to run a successful card game in 2020. No, I'm obviously not a card game strategist. I work in networking and things like that. But if anything, I'm hearing from all my contacts who are building networks for people now is that the companies that have that digital strategy can enable working from home have barely felt a difference. I've talked to a friend who said we were already enabled to work from home. We already had laptops. They just flicked a switch and said, okay, you're all at home now. And we didn't even feel the difference, except in the fact that I'm in my pajamas every day. And I was like, that's how it should be. So the fact that FFG doesn't have this digital strategy already is a disappointment, because if it wasn't for the hardworking fans who do such a good job on various platforms, I would have lost my favorite hobby for 4 or 5 months. And imagine how bad it would feel being in lockdown, but also if your favorite hobby was gone as well. And that's, I think, the crux of this is that I can say as a player, this is where I am. I've played L5R. I've played L5R in person twice since last November. I played at the World Championships. I did reasonably well, and then we had one other event in. Where was the event? There was in the UK Games Expo, which I went to. And then after that, this crisis hit, and I haven't actually played in person in 2 months. I've played in person twice in 7 months. So if the online platform didn't exist, none of the other support would exist, and I would just be less engaged in L5R in every single way. So But then when I think about the platform, I would love to have a positive association with the company that makes the game. I'd be like, well, this is the time they ran that online event for us, or they gave us these cool prizes to give out for that tournament, or they, rushed to get the new cards online before the pack became legal. And the fact that doesn't exist leaves me and a lot of other people feeling neglected. And we don't really understand why, because not doing digital, that that's not cost saving. In 2020, not doing digital is not cost saving. It's money lost. And that's really sort of the takeaway. So let's get off my quote, because I think that's a bit self-aggrandizing, but I think it made a good point, and I'm happy that I could paraphrase it from my other presentation. But let's talk about what the ideal is. So for Model A, where lots of people are buying digital products, you actually want the core sets to circulate pretty quickly so that they can produce updated core sets, correct errors, increase appeal, support shops by getting products off the shelf via aggressive marketing that communicates the benefits of the new version of the game. And you want people who see the product in your shop to buy the game and enjoy it, to buy additional products, and then to have a natural pathway to meet their local community and engage in organized play beyond searching for it online, which is how we get a lot of random people joining the Discord as they search for FFR, or they know how to use Discord, or they find Facebook, which leads them to the Discord. And that leads to customers having a positive engagement with the game, the setting, and telling other people about it. Word of mouth referrals are huge for board games. So, we've talked about how you do that, and creating marketing products, creating products that lead them to a positive experience, creating marketing products that tell them where the communities are. For your Model B customers, your digital customers, you have a lot of customers who just regularly engage with the product digitally while continuing to buy physical products. That's your ideal. You don't want people stopping buying physical products. A lot of people who play FFR Online, for example, buy physical products to go with their digital products because they want to play the deck that they've been practicing online in person. You want customers to be able to purchase some form of digital products online and be willing to spend money outside of visits to a shop, right? Maybe they spend money with the shop, but maybe they spend it remotely and they bring the code to your online platform to redeem a deck, right? Any system you want to set up, there's loads you can think of. Then, because you've got a digital product that you can acknowledge and promote, you can then push your product to compete for attention alongside Runeterra, which is very popular, MTG Arena, Hearthstone. Now, I'm not saying that L5R, for example, would be the next Hearthstone, but if you look at Keyforge, if Keyforge had a way to play online that was as polished as Hearthstone was, people would probably be playing Keyforge. They'd probably be dropping a tenner, buying a deck, having a great time, and there'd be a whole streaming thing with Hearthstone. But at the very least, if there was a mechanism whereby there was a light client that did something similar and didn't have all that polish, people would be still playing it, and it would compete with certainly screen time for MTG Arena. It probably wouldn't compete because it's not as polished in the same way or as established. But the point is that players would be engaging daily with your IP in many forms and feel that engagement was acknowledged and respected and not at risk from your company. I think that's important. They would feel that when they entered a tournament, for example, and there was an official prize, they would feel validated, and it would feed into in-game, in-life play. They wouldn't feel like, I'm doing this, but it's not really an official forum, and I'm not going to get anything from this. You lose out so much in terms of respect and acknowledgement by not interacting with customers the way they need to be interacted with. So I did up a bit of a chart, which is, when I think of the current, and this may not be entirely accurate, all of this, and I prefaced this at the start, is that all of this information is coming externally as someone viewing the company from a distance. And obviously there's a lot of things internally that I'm not going to know about, but, the fact is, if I'm seeing it this way, then clearly there is some sort of relevance, hopefully, to this. The current points of customer engagement is your customer buys a product, they like it, they buy more products, maybe they find your website online, they find the alternative rule sets, maybe they attend a physical event. There's 3 rough touch points that you can have. Maybe they watch your news updates. It's kind of the same. If they find your website, they listen to your news updates. That's kind of like all of the official touch points that currently exist. There's other ones that don't exist that aren't official, like finding the Discord, things like that, right? Okay? Ideal customer engagement points, right? Customer buys a product. Customer gets a marketing leaflet with the product that directs them to the online community and new game modes. Customer buys a supplementary product for alternate game modes, a small pack that tells them skirmish and gives them province tokens and a clan sticker or something they can use to show what clan they are when they build a deck. Then a person attends a physical or digital event where you're engaging with them in both ways, in their home and these big show events like your world championships, your store championships, your regional championships. They're never going to go away. People love playing in person. Digital doesn't threaten physical events. It boosts them because people practice online, feel like they've got a really good deck and a really good chance, and then come to the event. Then, of course, buy more product. If you've engaged with them, if they're engaging with the community, if they bought a supplementary product for an alternate game mode and they're having a lot of fun, they'll buy more products. Then they engage with the officially sanctioned online community and the official content in that community. So they're going to engage with people like me. They're going to engage with the Discord. They're going to have really positive communications with people. Some negative as well, but that's online. You can't always control that. That's fine. Communities have been dealing with negative online interactions for a long time. But my point is that you direct people to this, and in turn they interact with it and become ingrained with it. If they like the people they meet, then you've got a customer who's going to keep staying in that community and buying more products. So after they've been positively engaged by the game and the community, the player might give feedback on the game through official channels, and in doing so gain a stake in the game. There aren't really a lot of official channels for giving feedback on games, or saying what you liked, what you didn't like, or doing some sort of engagement with it. Maybe the customer engages with the setting of the universe and has a role in changing or leading it to further engagement, like a create your own card vote, or these sorts of things, which engage the customer in not only the current state of the game, but also the future state of the game in a way that makes the interaction more positive. And then, of course, the customer purchases products on an ongoing basis because you've made all these touch points and made all these positive experiences that make it worth their time. They feel like they've been courted because at every stage there was something that maybe interested them or gave them an opportunity to learn more about a game, right? So this is what I think it currently looks like. This is what I think it should look like. Online communities acknowledged, directed people to them. Supplementary products to supplement the game with other ways to play that will enhance the buying of the first product at a reasonable price point. Physical or digital events where people can play from their own home, and it's a lot less high risk. Remember, board gamers are not necessarily the most social people all the time. It's a lot less risky to play a few digital events and then go to a physical event when you feel like you've got a bit of confidence playing the game than it is to attend a physical event straight away when you don't know many people. Buying more products, engaging with the community, having things that make them want to engage more, like create your own cards or votes for FFG story and things like that. Maybe create your own house for Keyforge. It may not come out for 2 years, but if you create a house through voting, or you have a competition to design a new house, the person who wins that competition and everyone else who thinks it's cool is going to be so engaged in your game, right? So I've kind of covered a lot of these, but I'll briefly summarize kind of what the necessary steps are to achieve some of these things. So acknowledge fan-made digital platforms to provide support creators, or develop your own products that provide a similar service. Develop supplementary products for alternate game modes to be sold as add-ons alongside core products to drive sales. Create awareness of new player-friendly game modes for entry, or at minimum, create a marketing leaflet that informs people of these products for easy distribution alongside the sales of the product. Engage directly with digital communities and provide authorized content and outreach programs. This is kind of starting again, and I'm really excited about it. So hopefully I'll be able to do a video that talks about how good this has gone later on. Engage with online digital tournaments and provide support or acknowledgement. Accepting the reality of the day-to-day experiences of your game and finding a way to support it rather than just ignore it, right? Establish and this requires a whole that itself, that line requires an entire strategic shift at a cardboard company, which is hard. It's hard to shift at your company to change from, no, we've got to shut it down if it infringes our IP. Like that one sentence encapsulates discussions with lawyers, changing FFG's IP policy to allow for these sorts of things. Like there's lots of, don't think any of these points are easy. These points require hours of marketing time, legal time. They require CEOs and CTOs to change direction on things. They require a lot of thought, but realistically, it's 2020. Get your digital in order, or you're going to lose people. And one of the things I think would be really good is establish. You kind of have playtesters for this, but I don't think it should be playtest. Playtesters are looking for specific things, which is like balance, card wording, card design. Really, what you want is a kind of specific player council. And I don't know if you've seen the Council of Stellar Management in EVE, which is kind of like a yearly player council where they sit down either in a room or in digital and they talk about the long-term plans for the game in terms of where it's going, where the story's going, what organized play is thinking about doing, and they get feedback on all of that before it gets announced. So an example would be, sitting down with loads of players and saying, hey, we're thinking about opening up Keyforge to real money tournaments. How do you feel they need to work? Is it a good idea? And getting that feedback and putting it to good use. In L5R, it would be like, look, realistically, here are our plans for rotation. This is what we're doing with the core set. This is what our current plan is for how we get rid of it. This is where the story's going, like highlights. We may have a shift, an arc shift or something like that. What do you feel like? Is that a good direction? Is it too fast? Is it too slow? If you watched the video I made last week, I have complaints about the L5R story being too slow. In Keyforge, you could be like, are these house ideas cool? Do you think the theme resonates with the player base? Now, obviously, you can answer those questions in-house, but also, the players have a good grasp of what the community likes. Like I think I have a reasonably good grasp of what the community likes. I talk to a lot of people on a regular basis. I make these videos. I get a lot of comments on these videos, and I love these comments, guys. I respond to a lot of them because I really like the engagement of you telling me what you think about what I've said. If you disagree with something, that's great. I am not perfect in any way or shape or form. I'm happy to engage with people who disagree with me. And the point is that by doing that, I create a good dialogue where things are more understood. And I think that when you design things like this for people, getting the people engaged, like a small number of people under NDA, here's a broad overview of our current plans. How do you think the community is going to respond? That is gold. That is gold from a market intelligence and a marketing perspective. That's a focus group, telling you how things feel. And they'll get it wrong. Your sample group may not include all the right people. Maybe they say something that doesn't really work out. But the fact is, you're at least engaging. Like if you got people now to consult on the L5R story and you said, well, we're going to go on another 6 months in the next 3 years, they would probably say no. You can't just rely on videos like mine for feedback because I'm very opinionated, but I'm just one person with my own opinion. And even when you've got like 4 or 5 people doing a podcast, the fact is that they're probably quite similar people. They're probably friends. There's usually an echo chamber of views. Whereas if you get multiple people from different places in the world and all sorts of things sitting down and talking, you may have a concrete idea of how these things work. So that is the end of my presentation. I hope you found it interesting. Let's make sure that's on the right screen. Sorry. And what else really to say? I've obviously covered a lot of ground. I'm not going to make the presentation available, but you should be able to pause the video and read through bits if you're not sure. Obviously, if you disagree or have interesting additions or thoughts about what I've said, this is the first video I've made that talks about Keyforge as well, so I'll be sharing it with you guys. If you've reached the end of this 1 hour and 15 video, I hope you find it interesting. And generally, I think there's space for a discussion about how these games are designed. And I think that if they already know, the company FFG makes this game, they already know that there's a huge digital communities for these games, and they need something to push them over the line into committing resources, energy, effort to engaging with these games. And I think if we as communities, L5R, Keyforge, whatever, even the other LCGs that I play Arkham, I played a bit of Destiny, I played a lot of FFG games. I think they generally do make quite fun and quite interesting games. I make a lot of harsh videos about them, but that's because it's very easy to criticize something you like, but I always try and make sure I say some positive things about them as well, because if I didn't like the games, I wouldn't be this vested. My point is that if we as communities, Keyforge community, L5R community, make enough noise about what we need, what we demand even, to successfully enjoy their game, then they have to engage with us. They can't ignore it. So feel free to think about this yourself and think about how you might express this. If it's just taking a survey or maybe talking to your friends and realizing this is something you agree with and making your voice known, tweeting FFG or that sort of thing. Obviously we don't want to draw ire down on the platforms that we love and get them shut down, but equally, can they really do that? Like, they can. No, obviously they can. This is not a threat nor a challenge. It's more just, the damage, and I think I've covered it very well in this video about how important those are to the day-to-day enjoyment of these games. So I'm going to leave you with that thought, just about how important digital is to these games, despite the fact the company that makes the game doesn't seem to have a digital strategy for them. And they can't treat card games which require regular, ongoing, active engagement like board games which you buy and take home and play never, right? So card game communities are different. You need a digital strategy for them in 2020 because we've got MTG Arena, we've got Hearthstone, we've got examples. So I'm going to leave you with that thought. Thanks for watching. If you made it for an hour and 15 minutes, my voice is getting sore. And I don't know what the next topic of my video will be. I know that I will be streaming on Twitch for the rest of the weekend, actually, because I'm running another one of my online events for L5R. So, depending on when you watch this video, that may have already happened, but all the content will be on my YouTube channel on the LLO playlist, so you can watch through and hear more of my voice. And of course, if you're watching this tonight, as you may be if you're in America, tune in to myself or HandsomeDan_504. So Steelfur Live, HandsomeDan_504 on Twitch. And we'll be streaming the LLO online tournament series for the rest of the weekend. So come and watch that. So yeah, thanks for watching and have a good evening.